If you walk into the shop of a professional furniture maker, someone who has been building commission pieces for 30 years, and whose work sells for prices that would make most people sit down quietly for a moment, you will notice something strange on the wall above the bench. Hanging there alongside whatever expensive European joinery tools they have accumulated over a career are clamps that look like they came from a garage sale, clamps that cost $8 a piece, clamps from brands that serious woodworking publications have never reviewed and probably never will. They are dented. They are paint spattered. Some of them have been bent back into shape by hand after an incident nobody talks about anymore. And those clamps do the same work as the $50 parallel jaw bars hanging next to them on the same glue-ups, with the same results on the same furniture that ends up in the same living rooms. When you ask about it, the answer is always some version of the same thing. You need enough clamping pressure in the right places, held long enough for the glue to cure. Everything beyond that is optional. Most of the premium clamp market exists in that optional territory. The 5 clamps on this list exist in the territory that actually matters. Half of them you have encountered before, though perhaps not as seriously as they deserve. The other half are the clamps that professionals reach for without explaining themselves, because the explanation requires admitting something the tool industry would rather you never fully absorb. Before we get into the list, you need to understand what a clamp is actually being asked to do, because the marketing around premium clamps has done an impressive job of obscuring something that is genuinely simple. A clamp has one job. It applies pressure to a joint, while the adhesive cures. The variables that determine whether it does that job well are also simple. First is clamping pressure, meaning how much force the clamp can apply and sustain without the screw backing off or the frame flexing out. Second is jaw alignment, meaning whether the 2 clamping faces stay parallel to each other under load or whether they rack and concentrate pressure at one edge of the jaw rather than distributing it evenly across the joint. Third is how the clamp interacts with the workpiece, meaning whether the jaw faces mar the wood surface, whether the bar or pipe deflects under load in a way that introduces a curve to the joint, and whether the whole assembly stays where you put it or shifts while you are reaching for the next clamp. Those 3 things cover essentially everything that separates a clamp that works from a clamp that does not. The parallel jaw clamp, the design that commands $50 to $80 per unit from the premium brands, solves the jaw alignment problem elegantly and completely. It also introduced the widespread belief that jaw alignment was the primary problem every woodworker faced in every clamping situation, which is a belief that happens to be worth a great deal of money to the companies selling the solution. The honest reality is that most clamping operations in a normal shop, panel glue-ups, assembly of casework, edge gluing boards, clamping parts for drilling, can be executed perfectly well with clamps that cost a fraction of that price if you understand 2 things. First, what the clamp needs to do in that specific situation. Second, how to use technique, specifically wooden cawls and careful clamp placement, to compensate for any racking tendency in a less expensive jaw. That knowledge turns a wall of $40 clamps into a completely workable shop toolkit. It also explains why every professional shop you will ever walk into has a mix of expensive and cheap clamps on the wall, and why the cheap ones see just as much use. Number 5. The Pittsburgh F-clamp from Harbor Freight. I understand the reaction. Harbor Freight is the store where you buy the drill press you use twice a year, and the angle grinder you are genuinely surprised works as well as it does. And it is not where most serious woodworkers expect to find a clamp they will still be using in 15 years. But the Pittsburgh heavy-duty F-clamp, the steel bar version in the 12-inch and longer sizes, is a legitimate working tool that professional shop woodworkers buy in quantities of 20 and 30 at a time without embarrassment. The bar is solid steel, not a hollow extrusion. The swivel pad on the anvil jaw rotates to accommodate surfaces that are not perfectly parallel, which prevents the marring and slipping that cheaper fixed-jaw designs produce. The screw thread is coarse enough to advance quickly and fine enough to apply real pressure when you drive it down. Is it a Bessie? No. The jaw alignment under heavy load is less consistent, the finish is rougher, and the longevity of the screw mechanism under daily production use is not the same. But for the shop woodworker who needs 15 or 20 F-clamps for a case assembly and does not want to spend $800 acquiring them, the Pittsburgh does the work. The lesson it carries is the same one this list returns to repeatedly. The brand exists to sell the experience of buying. The tool exists to do the work. Those are two different things, and the price reflects the first one far more reliably than it reflects the second. Number 4, the Jorgensen C-clamp. Jorgensen is an American brand that goes back to the late 19th century and spent most of the 20th century as the default choice for industrial and commercial clamping applications across the country. The C-clamp is the oldest clamp form in woodworking, a simple C-shaped frame with a threaded rod through one end and a swivel pad at the tip, and it is a design that the industry has been quietly trying to retire for decades in favor of products that cost more and require more frequent replacement. The vintage Jorgensen C-clamp, the production made through the mid to late 20th century that you find at estate sales and flea markets for $1 or $2 a piece, is made from drop-forged steel with a frame cross-section thick enough to resist deflection under serious load. The screw threads are cut to a standard that the modern economy version does not match. Put one of these in your hand and squeeze it against a joint, and what you feel is a clamp that has no interest in moving, flexing, or releasing until you tell it to. C-clamps are dismissed in contemporary woodworking conversation because they are slow to apply, because the single screw contact point can rack the joint if you are not paying attention, and because they look like something from a machine shop rather than a furniture studio. All of that is true, and none of it is a reason to leave them on the estate sale table. For clamping parts to a bench, for holding glued assemblies in tight spots where a bar clamp will not fit, for every application where you need serious pressure in a small footprint and you are willing to take 30 seconds to apply it properly, a good Jorgensen C-clamp is a better tool than most of what replaced it. Number 3, the Record Sash Clamp. Record is a Sheffield brand, and if that pattern is starting to feel familiar by now, it should. Sheffield produced some of the finest edge tools and clamping hardware in the world for most of the 19th and 20th centuries. And the Record Sash Clamp is the product that British furniture makers and joiners reached for when they needed to glue up wide panels or assemble large casework with confidence. The sash clamp is a long steel bar with a fixed head at one end containing a screw mechanism and a sliding tail stop that locks anywhere along the bar's length with a simple pin. Compared to a modern parallel jaw bar clamp, it is primitive looking. The jaws do not pivot or adjust. The bar is not engineered to prevent deflection under load. The whole assembly looks like something that belongs in a Victorian joinery shop, which is more or less where it came from. And then you use one for a panel glue-up. The Record Sash Clamp applies enormous, sustained clamping pressure through a screw mechanism that is robust enough to have survived decades of commercial use without complaint. The sliding tail stop adjusts instantly to any board width without tools. The long bar length options up to 4 feet and beyond in some versions handle wide panels that would require multiple shorter clamps in a parallel jaw system. In the United States, Record hardware is invisible to most buyers. The brand never achieved the retail presence it had in Britain, and the clamps that do appear in the American market tend to show up at estate sales and in the tool storage of older craftsmen who either imported them deliberately or encountered them through the furniture-making trade, which means you can still find them for almost nothing if you know what you are looking at. That is a situation that will not last indefinitely. This is a good moment to stop and say directly, if this kind of breakdown is useful to you, Subscribing to the channel costs you nothing, and it means this kind of honest look at tools keeps getting made. And if you want the full breakdown of which clamps to prioritize for which operations and what to inspect before you buy used, I have a guide that covers exactly that, and I will come back to it at the end. Number 2, the Pony Pipe Clamp Fixture. The Pony brand has been making pipe clamp fixtures in the United States since the 1930s, and the pipe clamp fixture is the most misunderstood value proposition in all of woodworking hardware. Here is what it is. Instead of buying a complete clamp, a bar with heads already attached, you buy only the 2 heads, the fixed jaw with the screw mechanism and the sliding stop jaw, and you thread them yourself onto a length of standard black iron pipe purchased at any plumbing supply or hardware store for a few dollars per foot. The result is a clamp of whatever length you need, from 18 inches to 8 feet, at a total cost that makes every other bar clamp on the market look like a premium purchase. A pair of Pony fixtures in the 3/4 inch pipe size costs around $12 to $15. A length of black iron pipe in whatever size you need costs $2 to $4 per foot. You now have a panel clamp with more clamping surface and more sustained pressure than clamps sold at $30 or $40 apiece. You can cut the pipe to whatever length the job requires and extend your collection for the cost of additional pipe at any hardware store in the country. Professional cabinet shops that do production work in solid wood, shops that glue up dozens of panels a week, use pipe clamps in numbers that would astonish the average hobbyist. Not because they cannot afford better, because pipe clamps apply serious, reliable clamping pressure across long faces without the deflection problems that affect lighter bar clamps under equivalent loads, and they do it for less money per linear inch of clamping capacity than anything else on the market. The pipe clamp has a reputation problem because it looks industrial and rough, and because it requires the extra step of sourcing pipe separately. That extra step costs you 20 minutes the first time you do it, and saves you hundreds of dollars every time after. Number 1, the Bessie TG Tradesman Clamp. CTG. Bessie is the most respected clamp brand in the world, a German company whose K-body parallel jaw clamps sit at the top of almost every serious woodworker's wish list, and whose price point reflects that position without apology. And sitting right next to the K-body in the Bessie catalog, largely invisible to the buyers who came specifically for the flagship, is the TG Tradesman series. Same company, same manufacturing standards. Steel bar, not the composite bar of the K-body. Jaw alignment that is not quite at the parallel jaw level of the premium line, but is dramatically better than most of the competition at half the price or less. The clamping pressure is serious. The screw mechanism is smooth. The swivel pads protect the wood surface without the kind of grip failure that cheap fixed pads produce when the surfaces are not perfectly parallel. This is Bessie, applying 70 years of clamp manufacturing knowledge to a price point that working shops can actually justify multiplied across 20 or 30 units. Professional furniture makers who have used the full Bessie lineup often describe the TG as the clamp they reach for first on most operations, not the K-body, because the K-body is genuinely better for applications that demand precise jaw alignment, and the TG is genuinely good enough for everything else. The TG gets ignored because it does not have the prestige of the flagship, and it does not have the low-price shock value of the Harbor Freight alternative. It sits in the middle, doing serious work quietly, the way the best tools always do. The name on the clamp is Bessie. The price is not. That is the summary of the entire argument this list has been making. So where does all of this leave you when you are standing in front of a clamp display trying to make a sensible decision with real money? It leaves you with a framework that is simpler than the industry wants it to be. Ask what the clamp needs to do in the specific operations you run most often. Ask whether jaw alignment is genuinely critical for that operation, or whether a call and careful placement will handle it. Ask whether the price difference between the premium option and the honest working option reflects a real difference in the outcome of the work, or a difference in the story attached to the tool. Most of the time, the answer to that last question is going to send you towards something cheaper than you expected to buy and better than you expected it to perform. And before we close, the question I get most often about clamps is whether it makes sense to buy used, and the answer is almost always yes, with one condition. The thing to check on a used bar clamp or C-clamp is the screw mechanism. Threads that have been cross-threaded or that advance with grinding resistance are telling you something the price is not. Threads that advance smoothly and hold under load are telling you the clamp still works regardless of what the surface looks like. Surface rust cleans off. A damaged thread does not. The guide linked below covers what to look for across every clamp type on this list, and which used clamp purchases are worth pursuing, and which ones to leave on the table, no matter how low the price drops. The link is in the description. Every clamp on this list was either designed or used by someone who understood that pressure is pressure, and the wood does not care what brand of machine applied it. That understanding is worth more than the most expensive clamp in the catalog.